This is what a 48-hour binge on crack was like for me. And yes, there's some fraud involved, a hooker, some severe psychosis. This story for me sticks out because I have changed so much since being that person. My name is Kelly. I'm a former crack addict and alcoholic. I'm sober since August 3rd, 2011. And I share these stories for two reasons. Number one is to help you identify with someone who's been there, so you can actually see that there is a way out. I am so far removed from that person that I used to be that I can't believe I did the things that I used to do. And the second reason is to remind myself of how far I've come. So this is actually a positive experience for me when I get to retell these stories. So let's see what it looks like. This story takes place right after I got kicked out of a treatment center because I was arrested in there. I'd been using crack while I was in that rehab center. I was using one Saturday. The staff were all off for the weekend. The switch went on. I had to get more. I robbed this poor woman. I was eventually tracked down and arrested after I jumped through a freezing cold river and got out the other side, stole a mountain bike. The cops caught up with me. I was arrested, and of course they kicked me out of the rehab center. So I was back in the rehab center having a meeting with them to say, hey, can I maybe come back and I'll try harder this time? But instead of actually showing up for this meeting, my family dropped me off there. I waited until they were gone and I bolted. I had 2 unemployment checks in my pocket, so I snuck over to the bank. I cashed both of those checks. That gave me about $800, and I made my way over to the trap house where I knew I could get drugs very quick. And let me tell you something for real. Maybe you can relate to this. There's a certain amount of excitement and confidence that comes from having $800 in your pocket and walking into a shitty rooming house filled with people who have absolutely nothing because you become king for a day. And that's exactly how I felt. And plus there's the anticipation and the excitement because I know I am about to get high and I got $800 back in me, so that's going to last me for several hours. So I'm pretending to have a great time. You know, after that first hit, for me, really nothing good ever happens, but I'm now the most popular person at this rooming house because I got money. I'm giving people hits and stuff like that. But in the back of my mind, well, actually in the front of my mind, I know this: my family is now feverishly scouring the city looking for me because I have disappeared once again, and I know that they're heartbroken, and here I am using drugs with these people in a rooming house. So about 12 hours into it, well, the $800, that's gone, the drugs are gone, and I don't have any more money in the bank, so the switch is on again. I have to do something to get more money. So what do? Well, I take my ATM card and I go over to the ATM and I take an envelope and I stuff it with nothing and I say, here you go, here's $500 in a check, and I remove that $500 right back out of the ATM in cash. So I've just committed fraud now. So to add to the anxiety and the paranoia of knowing my poor family is now scouring this city looking for me, having to hide from them and their cars so they don't ruin my good time, now I know I've just committed fraud and that it's going to catch up to me at some point. I had this guy drive me around. Of course, I'd give him the odd hit, and we had this girl with us and she was a hooker, so she's like, why don't we just go back to my place, just the three of us, and forget about those other people. I said, perfect, this is exactly what we need. So we went and bought a very large amount with the money that I had, stopped by the liquor store, bought a ton of beer because you're gonna have to come down at some point, and for me that was, I needed to have some alcohol when I was coming down just in case we ran out. Got back to her place, and so she decides, she is one of those very patient addicts, I think, because we're sitting there for 45 minutes. She's holding on to the stuff that we purchased, and I'm just dying for a hit, but she's fashioning this pipe out of a little M&M's character, a little plastic M&M's man. She's like, no, wait, I'm gonna make this. She attaches this giant hose and stuff like this to this thing. I'm just going, come on, can we just not do it? She eventually gets this contraption done. We set it up. I take the first hit, and she loaded it with a piece bigger than I've ever seen before. I am pretty sure she was trying to get me to overdose so she could take all my shit, and I almost did because I started to flutter. My eyes started to flutter. I actually had to stop and lie on the bed because I was freaking out. I was about to start doing the chicken, and if you know what that is, you know, it's a convulsion that your body goes into when you've taken too much of this stimulant. I barely escaped going into that mode. Now 24 hours in, a whole day's gone by. I haven't showered, I haven't eaten, I barely am drinking anything. I smell like shit. I'm sure I look terrible. I know I look terrible. I was actually 40 pounds heavier back then, so even when I was sober, I still looked like crap. So I can't imagine what I looked like when I'd been up for 24 hours using drugs. I went back to the ATM. I stole another $500, so that's double fraud we're talking about now, which did end up catching up to me. I know my family's looking for me, so I'm super paranoid, right? I'm starting to see things that aren't there. I'm starting to hear those voices that aren't there. The psychosis is setting in. It's tough being with different personalities when you're on a 2-day bender. Me, I'm quiet. I don't like to do anything, just sit there. But the girl I was with, she was hyperactive. She was crazy. She took a piece of what we had, the dope, and she whipped it behind her TV. I realize now, well, she was doing that because she wanted to hide it for herself for later, but I was on to her, and I'll tell you what happened there. At about 30 hours, she decided she wants to go and have a nap. She had to crash, but she takes what we had left and she put it in her bra there. So I'm not going to go digging around in there. I don't need that hassle. But I do remember, she threw that thing behind the TV, so I'm like it was behind her computer desk. I'm underneath the computer desk digging around in dust and cords, and I said, I found it. It was like a 50 piece or something like that, so I was so happy. So I actually had something to use while I was busy drinking all the beer that was in the fridge as well. So now I was using the drugs and I was drinking the beer, and the driver was in the living room, and I would throw him a piece the odd time. But man, so no, it brings us to about a day and a half, 36 hours into this whole ordeal. And have you ever had that feeling where the sun comes up and you can hear the birds outside, but you've been up for a long time, and it's the worst sound and the worst thing that you could ever see? I went through that twice at this point. It was so depressing, and I just know my entire life is about to completely fall apart, even worse than it already had. But I can't stop. There's still some stuff there, and I'm like on the run. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I just use until I can't use anymore. Third trip to the ATM, that means the third time I committed fraud. I tried that once more after that, but they were on to me at that point. I guess someone at certain point had gone to the ATM and emptied and said, hey, there are 3 empty envelopes from this Kelly guy. Let's maybe shut his card down. So now we're almost 48 hours in. I left the girl at her place because she got crazy. She went a little violent, and so me and the driver went over to this other trap house. I had $40 left, so I invested that in the last little piece that I could find, and I had this tiny little bottle of rum that I was begging people to trade me for just one last hit. And so this is the point that every drug user goes through when you go on a long binge. You're out of drugs, you're out of money, all the friends that were hanging around with you, they're gone because you've got nothing left to give. And the thought is despair, it's terror, it's oh my God, now I have to face what I've just created. The reason I took that first hit was always to feel good, knowing full well that at a certain point it was going to make me feel terrible, but I did it anyway. So what do I do after these 2 days? I have one option: to go to the local Detox and beg them to take me in so I have a place to sleep. Lucky for me, they let me in, and it was kind of funny because I was in there. I remember talking to the Detox girl like a couple of days after I got there, and she was going through the crime section in the newspaper because of that robbery I'd committed. She's going, okay, was this you? And she was pointing to an incident. I'm like, no, that wasn't me. What about this one? Was this you? It was just kind of a crazy thing that I'm like, wow, am I really having this conversation? I used to be a very good salesperson. I used to sell wireless networking equipment. I'm in a Detox talking to a woman about robberies I may or may not have committed. I left there in about 4 days, and I went over to a homeless shelter, and I lived there for the next 2 months before I got myself into my third and final rehab center. That's how insane I was about this drug. I'm so glad I don't have to live like that anymore. And hey, if you want to know exactly how I did it, how I got clean, and how I got happy, go to my bio and grab the Sobriety Blueprint. These are step-by-step instructions of exactly how you can get clean and stay clean. And not only that, to set some goals, to get a great daily routine. We talk about some fitness in the Sobriety Blueprint. All these things that were super, super important to me when I finally got clean for good back in 2011. Hey, I love you so much. I really appreciate you watching this. Like it, subscribe, and hey, I'll see you in the next one.